I just know that sometimes we feel like we have to recommend a kid instead of, this is why Michelle's here. I want you to know Michelle's a resource. So if you have a kid and you know that there's something there, but they're just not fitting into what you're doing in class, Michelle's your person. Reach out to CST, not to recommend a kid, but maybe to ask a question on how to deal with a kid who does this. He's not doing what he's not doing what I ask everybody else to do, but he does this, and he seems like he wants to do something. You have all these people in district. Michelle, Dan, Tom Semko, that's why he'll probably be doing one of our workshops too. He's trying to have teachers creating lessons like that Dan's doing, but in the classroom. So, that might not apply to everybody in this room. Gloria, I have no idea what Tom would tell you to do in Spanish class. I have no, but Anthony, I bet Tom can come up with something really cool for you to do with your PE students. Like, all you have to do is say, Tom, can you stop in my classroom and just help me come up with an idea? And Tom will be there. He will spend the half of the day with you if you let him, as long as you provide him snacks. So, these people are here, and that's why I like you to meet them if you don't already know them, because if you're not in a building where Michelle is, you probably didn't even know who she was before she walked in this room. So you have to know who you can reach out to in district, so you can get some ideas on how to deal with different students.
And we have the behaviorist full-time who started.
Right.
Well, when you think about a student who's classified for CST, it's because there's a discrepancy, because they have this high IQ and they're not performing to the level of their ability.
And I don't think people realize we test for giftedness
too. No, you absolutely do.
The child is
I've been pulled into CST before with meetings with parents. I've been pulled into INRS, and and very often it's like, yeah, send them to me, see what happens, and boom, it's a whole change in the students. It's amazing.
Our testing really tells you a profile of who they are as a learner and exactly how they learn best.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really cool. It's fascinating. I mean, these kids are all so different, and yet, yeah.
I think this message needs to really be put out there for all the teachers, because if it's not just, okay, their notebook doesn't look the same, so now let's grade them differently, as opposed to let's slow it down and give them the time. Like, I'm talking about my population right now. Some of them maybe could really flourish, but it's like this in the classroom moving on, that all of a sudden they turn around, and I'm even turning around and I'm like, oh wait, they need to get that time, that if they had the opportunity to build and to do something different, you never know what you could potentially get out of them, as opposed to just having a conversation, just writing it down, because they can't get their thoughts out that way.
Right. Well,
so I think this is a huge message that needs to be put out there.
It's funny, the things that, I'd like to have like a whole host of like PD sessions, because there's so many strategies you can use with your kids, and a lot of them that I use with my students. What's good for gifted is very often good teaching, and isn't good teaching good for everybody? The things that I do in my classroom can be done in any classroom. You just adjust the level of it. I had fifth graders last year who were learning about, the colonies, and we kind of got off on a tangent where they started talking about slaves, and they started bringing in artwork that was created, primary sources that was created, in the 1700s about what plantations looked like, artwork that was created in the mid-1800s, artwork that was created 10 years ago of what does slavery look like. And you can see how it changed throughout the time. They got into a debate, just my little group here. What was slavery really? All I'm getting is what's from the textbook, and that's somebody else's opinion. I need to make my own opinion of what slavery was like. And look, here's two pictures from the 1700s. One's of a slave, drawn by slaves, and one was drawn by a plantation owner. Why do they look different? They're from the same year. And talking about those big concepts, any student can do that. Any student would love to do that. And not worried about memorizing. That's a great thing that they have the Chromebooks now. You don't have to worry about making sure they get all the facts. If they can look it up, why are you teaching it? Right? You can have them really dive into the material and analyze it and look for the bigger picture, because that's what they're going to do when they're an adult. Nobody's asked me, how many battles George Washington fought in. Like, if I was ever on that, who did that? Jay Leno? The Jaywalkers, where they'd ask, common questions, and some people didn't know, and I was like, how could you not know that? Why does it matter? Why do you care? They're a functioning human being, they're contributing to society. Just because they didn't know, how many phases of the moon there are, or whatever, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make them any less of an intellectual, any less of a person than you or me. It just means that their interests and their passions and their dedication and what they're able to give you lies somewhere else. It doesn't matter. Sorry, we're getting off on a big tangent. I want to make sure I get you out of here by 5. I'm driven and motivated. But think about it. we talk about gifted ed is outside of the box thinking. Well, think outside the box when you're dealing with your gifted ed students and all your students really, because that's where amazing things can happen. So taking into consideration the students that you're thinking of, I want to kind of do a little activity, but we'll be briefing it instead of really diving into it. Because again, it's up here for you if you ever want to go back. I want to give each table a characteristic, and I want you to think of just one positive implication of a characteristic and one negative implication of a characteristic. So an example could be humor. Very often gifted learners have a great sense of humor. So a positive with that is they have a great sense of humor, they get your jokes. But a negative side of that is that they get your jokes sometimes. You know what I mean, right? So there's positives and negatives for all these characteristics, and I want you to think about them as individuals. If they have a really high intellectual curiosity, well, that's great because then they're constantly eating up new information and searching out, all that they can find out about everything possible. But a negative implication could be, well, they could find something that developmentally, mentally, they're not ready for. Academically, sure, they can read that advanced book, they can learn these advanced topics, but emotionally,